the day. I want to welcome up our corporate partner here in Boston, Bill Collins, who's going to introduce our next panel.
Hey, Paula. Hey, everybody. Great to see you. I'm going to quickly introduce myself and then get out of the way for the real start of this session. So Bill Collins, as Julie mentioned, I'm a partner here in the Boston office at Goodwin. In the life sciences practice, I have the distinct pleasure of working with companies of all stages, sizes, focuses, and have a real passion for working with companies focused on rare disease, just like X4. And we're going to get to hear my client and my friend Paula Ragan talk a little bit about that journey. And thank you all for sticking with us. I know we're the last thing between you and the networking reception, which is always a great place to be on the agenda. But I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. So that we'll get started. Paula, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Excellent. So we'll just jump right in here. So you were the founder and CEO of X4, and would love to hear a little bit about your background and what brought you to the point in your career where founding a company like X4 really struck a chord with you.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for having me here today. And this has been a phenomenal panel. It's just been very patient focused. Every speaker talked about, individual stories and how their own lives have been shaped by patients. And so that to me is a lot of wind in my sails as I just start to sit here. So I appreciate that. Well, just a little bit about my background. So I really love science and engineering, and I love thinking about how to use that to solve clinical problems and improve health outcomes and reduce suffering. It's just, my poor kids are like, how did you know what you wanted to do so early? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's a programming thing, but it's been at an early age. I went to grad school in pursuit of this interest and was lucky enough to be part of a graduate program where we actually got to interact with patients right away, even in grad school. And again, that really created this imprint into me of the patient voice. I then got to think about, where can this have a large impact? And I love the biotech industry. I love having, working within an industry that has no borders as it relates to a country or a geography. Industry can bring solutions to anyone, anywhere in the world. And that is very much resonant with rare disease. Again, whether you're in Mexico, France, or the US, when you have these very challenging conditions, it's that unifying voice and that unifying approach that I think industry can have such a phenomenal impact on. So my journey started in industry about 25 years ago. I went from grad school into biotech. And the first half of my career, I was incredibly lucky to work at Genzyme. I heard someone mention that company name a little while ago, and it was an amazing place to work because the medicines that they created were disease modifying and gave a voice to these tiny but mighty rare disease communities, and they show how it could be done, right? They were the first wave. And showing that it could be done for such a small number of patients with such a huge impact created a cascade of, well, we can do it too across the industry. So I was incredibly lucky to work there and to sort of almost, drink the water and take that with me. I was at Genzyme, and then it was acquired by Sanofi. And during that transition, I realized I wanted to try to see if I could recreate that magic, start my own company. It's a little bit of both being brave and naive at the same time, for sure. But that was over 10 years ago now, and I spun some assets out of Genzyme. The technology and science is actually very applicable to human health. It's about improving your immune system surveillance, improving the trafficking of immune cells. And 10 years later, we've been incredibly lucky to get a drug first approved in the US just last year called Xolremdy. So it was grown from an N of 1 to a phenomenal group of people. I am incredibly lucky to do the job that I do, to think about the patients we serve, and to work with the group that comprises X4. So that's a little bit of my background.
And over that 10 plus years, you mentioned that commercial approval last year. You have additional development programs in motion now. How has the company's vision changed over time, and what are some of the reasons for those changes?
Yeah, so I mean, like everything, I would say the things that stay the same are that scientific focus, and then you just never know what happens when you figure out how to think about applying preclinical evidence to human translation and clinical trials. So I mentioned a little bit about immune surveillance. And when the company was founded, we were actually split between thinking about how to help rare disease patients as well as immuno-oncology. Big go-go days in the mid-teens around immuno-oncology combinations, and the target was particularly relevant. So we did straddle a world of partially understanding what this mechanism could do in people with cancer, as well as what could this drug do in people with immunodeficiencies. So that core science was the same. You have to let the science and the investments play out. And what the data really drove home was the biggest disease-modifying approach was really evident in our rare disease indications, including WHIM syndrome, which is a very rare form of immunodeficiency. So I would say the vision of the mechanism and what the immune system can do has been very consistent. And then what we've learned over time and investment in rigorous trials is its primary opportunity is in the immunodeficiency space.
So we've heard a few times throughout the day today about the focus on the patients, and you've already mentioned that as we've been sitting here. And so the idea of no patient left behind, and companies and organizations that are focused on that as a core mission, for companies like X4 who are in the industry and also have investors and other constituencies that you need to answer to, and thinking about how those two interplay. Maybe starting with the no patient left behind idea, how do you all take that mindset forward as you think about product development and patient impact?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe just a little bit about the disease that we're first treating, because it can help kind of orient. So it's an ultra rare disease, which, if you Google it, you might walk away from the room thinking there's 50 patients in the US. We all know there's always more. There's no natural history. There's no great genetic studies. There's no infrastructure. They're challenging diseases to even identify clinically, let alone genetically. So the good news is I feel like again, the naive and brave combo of 10 years ago is, I didn't really care, right? If you really wanted to know, I'm like, if I had that disease, or you want people, if you have a disease modifying drug, I almost believe it's our industry's obligation to take it as far as it can go, period. And for all the big pharma out there who I keep on wondering, where is rare disease getting a little bit lost? I think people still believe in the patients and the vision, but you know what? You have to put your money where your mouth is. I absolutely applaud these huge diseases and the huge medical impact that they can have, but what you should be doing is then bringing back that benefit to a broader population. It's the whole world we're trying to treat, not just, the larger sectors of the universe. So I think it's really important that no patient gets left behind, whether you're a beneficiary of all the positives that I've seen and read about GLP-1s, or if you're the small number of patients with any of the rare diseases mentioned in this room. They're all problems. They all need to be solved.
And taking that philosophy in your interactions with your investors and strategic partners over the years, how has that sentiment shifted or changed, or what's your perspective on how those conversations have gone since you formed the company?
Yeah, I mean, I do think the investor community, and one of my board chair references, there's a little bit of fad behavior in biotech, fortunately or unfortunately. And I feel a little bit, I used it the other day, I do feel like rare disease is a little bit in the bell bottoms category right now. And it's kind of frustrating me, even not in a non-good way. I'm like, we have shown think about the statistic. Half of the drugs that have been approved are for rare diseases. That's an insane, disproportionate amount of success. So I think I'm a little bit frustrated with the recognition of success, because success begets success. You get these drugs approved, they are explored in other disease areas and other mechanisms and other animal models. It just opens up the door to new understandings of human disease. So I do think the investor community, actually, we have great investors. X4 has great investors. They're very long-term oriented, but I think overall, there's a bit more of a short-term orientation in the last 5 or 10 years and in the investor community. And when you have a product like life cycle that's 10 years, you can't adjust for that. Good medicines take time.
Do you think there would be, like, what do you think could change that and reduce those headwinds that you face? Is it a notable success story? Is it continued advocacy? Like, what sorts of things do you think could shift that conversation?
Yeah, so I mean, I think maybe there's two parallel things that can improve. I do think the last, 2 to 3 years in general have been the toughest, just the headwinds with the overall markets. They're like the macroeconomic element to our industry. We can't ignore it. So I think there's some opportunity to hopefully have that change, and then that can halo effect into biotech specifically. Then I do think that at all levels of our industry, whether it's pharma or biotech or mid cap or small cap, I think we have to be a little bit more organized. And this is where I think about some of the industry groups that we have in terms of showing that we're willing to collaborate amongst ourselves and optimize the dollar, as well as optimize the dollar through public private initiatives. I think there were a few mentioned here that were very inspiring. So I think we have to all realize we have to kind of stretch our dollars more and not be so isolated. How can we create consortiums? How can we that was a great idea of like a bucket trial. Like, imagine if there's similar things that we can measure across a number of patient populations. Why can't we try together? Right? Why do we have to kind of split the cost over 10 different companies as opposed to consolidate for one trial? Those are great ideas, and we need to be more opportunistic about that type of behavior.
Are there things that you're seeing, even things that you've heard today, that give you hope along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's because we're all fighters in this room, right? End of the day, right? It's about, there's always headwinds. There's always saying something's impossible until it is, and then it's no longer impossible. So I think, to me, just the grittiness of rare disease, it's bringing that voice, it's being patient as you're a patient, like continuing that arc of looking at natural history studies, looking at huge genomic data sets, taking the time to, and ICD-10 code was an awesome example. Like, we have tried to get an ICD-10 code for our disease, and we were told kind of it's almost like it's not worth it. And the contrarian, comment there is, I'm like, it's absolutely worth it, because the payers can understand what's happening to your disease. The investors can understand what's happening to those diseases. All of this begets a wealth of data that can better inform how we learn about patients, what we're impacting, and then how we can invest our trials and designs appropriately. So anyways, it was an example that really stuck out to me today. So, yeah.
I know you all have spent some time recently thinking about strategy outside the U.S. And had some important news along those lines earlier, just last month. Have you, in those conversations, and as you and your team and those around the table have thought about the company's strategy and focus, have you noted any material differences between appetite and interest outside the U.S. in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably let's start again with the patients and then the healthcare systems. They are very different. I would say we'll pick the European countries to start with. In some ways, they're better set up for rare disease, because I think they're kind of their care system kind of funnels patients a bit more naturally. The United States is just so wide and diverse; it just creates a harder, fabric within our healthcare system for these ultra rare conditions. And the European Union, as it's sort of co-located, there's a little bit more of a natural consolidation of patients, which helps with outreach, education, awareness, learnings, hearing the patient's voice. So I think that, to me, has just been a positive learning to try to see how can we learn from our partners, right? They are going to get to learn from their patients, maybe in a more efficient and quicker way, where we can try to translate those patient voices back into what's relevant into the U.S. So I'm very excited for those opportunities. And then I love the idea that, you know, anybody anywhere who speaks any language, the common theme is that they're experiencing these symptoms, and they feel connected because other people have them, right? One of my most profound memories in WHIM syndrome was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, we sponsored some patients to come to a patient advocacy meeting, and they were gracious enough to allow us to be in that room with them and meet them. The two of them had never met another patient with their disease, and they were, it was like watching like school kids get excited about, yeah, and then me too, and I have that, and do you not have a sense of smell? I don't either. And so they're like going, and there's just that you wouldn't even think to ask the question of what they were experiencing on their daily basis. And so I just think that's a really powerful human positivity, like we shared experiences is what binds us and moves us and hopefully keeps us going. So it's been great to be part of that already on an international level.
So talking a little bit more operationally from the trenches, you know, the regulatory landscape and different operational considerations that you have to contend with every day, in addition to, you know, life as a public company CEO. Maybe give a few examples, like how have your interactions with the FDA maybe changed over the years? What are you expecting? Not that you have a crystal ball, but, you know, as you continue to go forward with your, you know, your clinical development plans in chronic neutropenia, how do you view the regulatory landscape?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll maybe give the history around XOLREMDI a little bit, because and it's a list. So we got orphan drug designation, breakthrough therapy designation, rare pediatric disease designation. We did sell our PRV and fast track just on one drug. And so we did kind of run the gamut of these different types of interactions with the agency. I would say the theme that's very consistent, we're already on our second indication. It's also less rare, but considered a rare disease of immunodeficiency. So the agency has a high bar for efficacy, and that's appropriate, and safety, of course. Like they want to feel confident that these drugs are doing what we hope they will do through rigorous clinical study. And to be honest, I think it's fair. I think that they've been very fair in their approach with X4. I've seen how they created, and I can't remember the term, and I loved it. It was like rigorous it was a term that people used to just sort of create some adaptability but rigor. So I think that's what we've experienced with the agency. But at the end of the day, for our particular disease, we did do a randomized placebo-controlled double-blinded study, global, with 30 patients during COVID. And it was hard, and it was long, and it was scary, because we didn't know if we would even be able to finish it. So I don't know. I mean, I think I have a profound respect for the FDA. They for our particular situation, we both sort of push each other in ways where you get right to the edge of like, okay, we're good here. Like, do you hear us, and do we hear you? And I did really feel like there was a very thoughtful partnership, and we achieved great success with XOLREMDI, and we're certainly trying to repeat that positive effort with our next indication in chronic neutropenia.
What other lessons have you learned over the years thinking about, I mean, running a clinical trial during COVID on its own probably was more of an education than you had signed up for, but things like trial site selection and patient enrollment and patient criteria, what are some of the learnings that you'd be willing to share on those fronts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, one of the biggest challenges in our industry, if we could fix it or solve it, is how to improve the overall experience of clinical trials, helping patients understand it, helping train clinicians to execute it. Industry partners have to absolutely be part of that infrastructure to make sure data integrity and analyses. It is a really tough nut to crack. I was talking to one of my board members who works closely with a woman CEO of a CRO. And I know this sounds odd, given the innovation doesn't happen within the CROs, but if we could fix that whole arc with patients, clinicians, and CROs to make it more efficient, we would have such an impact on our industry. It would save hundreds of millions of dollars. That efficiency, not changing much, but just making it more efficient. So it is something that I'm really thinking about. I have not got a solution yet. We actually have something within our company called the Operational Effectiveness Initiative, where we're working on our phase 3 and measuring and trying to kind of keep this closed loop. How you could ever do that on like an industry-wide basis, maybe that's in my next life, but it's a tough nut to crack. It is, and you just try to keep learning and improving along the way.
So we've, again, going back to the idea of no patient left behind and the role of patients in the rare disease community, how have you all worked with patient advocacy groups over the years? How has that changed?
Yeah, so we were lucky. We started early. Even when we were designing our trials, we reached out to patient advocacy groups to see if they could help facilitate patient input to our trials, right? At the end of the day, you want to think about those that are walking the walk. So I think we've been really lucky. There's in patient advocacy, there's different, obviously, degrees of tenure and investment and their own fundraising efforts, and then how they also view industry. I would say the ones that we've been very successful with are the ones that view industry as, a partner, and to be able to magnify both voices, as opposed to, some of them are a bit more unidirectional thinking. It's industry to provide the patient advocacy support. I think we've had great relationships along the way, so I can even have those conversations with folks. Like I do use the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. Everybody should hold them as their poster child in terms of way back when being innovative enough to look at industry as like a partner and a way of creating and enabling innovation, but also demanding back from industry. So I really think we've been fortunate to have these types of partners to grow along the way, and both of us are still growing. I hope someday that X4 is as successful as some of the CF products, where we can create more CF-like success in the patient advocacy world.
So it's an uncertain time, and we don't need to. All you got to do is turn on the news, and there's all sorts of things that somebody in your position needs to deal with, whether they're regulatory, market-based, day-to-day operational. But as you used the phrase "wind in your sails" at the beginning of our session here, like what is putting the wind in your sails these days? As when you wake up every day and you say, "Yes, this is what I am dedicated and spending my days doing." Like what is it that keeps you going?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what our industry stands for. So I love reading about drug approvals, and then I love reading about patient stories, because those are the two things that we have to keep reminding ourselves of. This is a really long, hard road to get a drug approved, and I don't care where it comes from or how it happens. When something gets over the finish line, it is a miracle. And I remember when I got my first COVID shot, I was in the Heinz Convention Center, and I just wanted to stand up and be like, do you know what a miracle this is? Like, it's a miracle. Like, I don't know if you believe in them, but like, we didn't even know the sequence of this thing 15 months ago. And I'm getting an FDA, endorsed shot. It was just unbelievable. And I think like that's the power that we have. Sometimes it takes, 18 months and sometimes it takes 18 years, but it's to be celebrated every time it happens. And then on the patient side, it's like we're hearing we're now approved, so we get you have the ability to, through our patient our nurse educator, to hear the voice of the patients that are now on therapies, and it's positive and good. And then we're also learning, okay, what could make it better? Like all of that instills more, right? It instills us to kind of get up and learn about some more problems and figure out how we can solve them. So it's that patient voice. I mentioned it in the beginning. That's definitely something that, in a good way, stays in my heart and in my head. And then products, like I and we have so much to deliver, and it is about delivering something so somebody has a choice. Yeah.
So maybe we'll open it up here in the room and see if there's any questions or comments or proposals or anything that folks might want to share while we're here. Looks like you answered all their questions, Paula.
Okay.
That's great.
I know.
That's great.
I know everybody's ready.
Excellent. And I will just say, so thank you, Paula. I know you have a lot going on. I will also say, just on behalf of my partners, like, we love being involved with companies who are trying to make patients' lives better bit by bit every day, and having some small role in that to play. It puts the wind in our sails. I know I can speak on behalf of all my colleagues here in the room. So thank you all for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Paula. We
Thank
really
you, Paula.
appreciate it. All right, we've hit the
Yeah.
end of our session. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. We learned a lot. We heard a lot.